The forest is silent. December 1944. In the snow-covered hills of the WWII, a remote ridge in eastern Belgium near the German border, two entire American regiments vanish, not in a single catastrophic battle, not in heroic last stands that make it into history books. They simply disappear. Over 8,000 men, the 422nd and 423rd Infantry Regiments of the 106th Infantry Division, gone, cut off, surrounded, fragmented across miles of frozen woodland. When headquarters realizes what has happened, the scale is incomprehensible. Two full regiments, more soldiers than were lost at Pearl Harbor, have been swallowed by the Ardennes forest. Some will be captured, some will escape, some will die in the snow. But for days, no one knows how many. No one knows where they are. No one knows if they're fighting, fleeing, or already dead. Communications are severed. Positions are overrun. Command structure collapses. What should be two organized fighting units dissolves into hundreds of small groups and individual soldiers, scattered across a hostile landscape in the worst winter in decades. This is the largest mass surrender of American forces in the European theater. Over 7,000 men will eventually be taken prisoner. Hundreds more will die in the forest or escape in small groups over the following weeks. But in those first days, December 16th through 19th, 1944, they are simply gone. Erased from the map, vanished into chaos. For the generals coordinating the defense against Germany's surprise offensive, the disappearance poses a terrifying question. If two entire regiments can be destroyed in 72 hours without anyone understanding how, what else have we lost control of? Patrols sent to investigate find abandoned positions, equipment scattered in the snow, evidence of hasty retreat and desperate fighting, but the men themselves have vanished into German captivity, into unmarked graves, into the vast anonymity of the forest. What happened to the 422nd and 423rd Regiments in those 3 days of December 1944? And why did the full truth remain buried for decades after the war ended? To understand the disappearance, you must first understand three things the history books rarely emphasize. First, the replacement crisis. By December 1944, the US Army is hemorrhaging soldiers faster than the replacement system can supply them. Since D-Day, American forces have suffered over 500,000 casualties. The replacement depots, hastily constructed training centers in England and France, are overwhelmed. The system is breaking. Men arrive in France with as little as 6 weeks of basic training. Some have never thrown a live grenade. Others have fired their rifles fewer than a dozen times. They are formed into units and shipped to the front regardless of readiness. The 106th Infantry Division is a perfect example of this crisis. The division trained in the United States for 2 years, an unusually long period that should have produced a well-prepared unit. But during final preparations for deployment, the division was stripped of many experienced officers and NCOs, who were reassigned to replace casualties in units already in combat. The men who arrived in Europe in early December 1944 were well drilled in peacetime exercises but had never seen combat. Their officers were often newly promoted or transferred from other assignments. The division had trained together, but the final version that deployed was not the same unit that had spent 2 years preparing. They arrived in Belgium on December 10th, 1944. 6 days before the largest German offensive of the war. The 422nd and 423rd Regiments were positioned in the WWII, a remote, heavily forested ridge system considered a quiet sector. They were there specifically because it was supposed to be safe. a place where green troops could adjust to frontline conditions without facing serious threats. This belief would prove catastrophically wrong. Second, the intelligence failure. In December 1944, Allied intelligence is suffering from what will later be called victory disease. The prevailing belief among American and British commanders is that Germany is finished. The Wehrmacht is exhausted, depleted, retreating on all fronts. This belief is supported by selective reading of intelligence. Reports that confirm German weakness are emphasized. Reports suggesting otherwise are dismissed as exaggerations or German propaganda. General Omar Bradley, commander of the 12th Army Group, famously declares the Ardennes sector a calculated risk. He knows it is thinly defended, but believes the Germans are incapable of mounting a serious offensive there. He is catastrophically wrong. By early December, Germany has secretly assembled over 200,000 troops along the Belgian border. 28 divisions, including elite SS panzer units, over 1,000 tanks, 2,000 artillery pieces, all positioned under strict radio silence, camouflaged beneath trees and netting, moving only at night to avoid Allied aerial reconnaissance. German commanders have identified the Schnee Eifel as a perfect target. The American positions there form a bulge extending into German-held territory, a vulnerable salient that can be easily surrounded. The two regiments holding the ridge, the 422nd and 423rd, are isolated, inexperienced, and far from reinforcement. The German plan is to punch through on either side of the Schnee Eifel, encircle the two regiments, then drive west toward Antwerp. The Americans defending the ridge will be cut off and destroyed. On December 12, 1944, 4 days before the offensive begins, Allied intelligence estimates that Germany has only 50 divisions left in the west, most at half strength. The actual number is closer to 75, many at near full strength. The miscalculation will cost thousands of lives. Third, the logistics of obscurity. The Schnee Eifel is not just remote, it is geographically cursed. The ridge system runs northeast to southwest, rising above the surrounding valleys like a natural fortress. Dense pine forests cover the slopes. Narrow roads wind through the terrain, easily blocked by snow or destroyed vehicles. Villages are few and isolated. In December 1944, the Schnee Eifel becomes a frozen labyrinth. Heavy snow obscures landmarks. Cloud cover grounds, reconnaissance aircraft for days at a time. Radio communications are unreliable. The terrain blocks signals, creating dead zones where units can operate invisible to headquarters. The 422nd and 423rd Regiments are spread across this difficult terrain, their companies separated by miles of forest. Communication depends on field telephone lines strung through the trees, fragile connections easily severed by shell fire, weather, or German infiltrators. When the German offensive begins, these communication lines are cut within hours. The two regiments become isolated, not just from division headquarters, but from each other. Companies lose contact with battalions. Battalions lose contact with regimental command. The forest becomes not just a battlefield, but a trap. The 106th Infantry Division arrives in the Schnee Eifel on December 11, 1944. They are assigned to relieve the battle-weary 2nd Infantry Division, which has been holding the sector for months and desperately needs rest. The relief is conducted hastily. The 2nd Division's veterans try to brief the newcomers, explain the terrain, point out German positions across the valley. But there isn't enough time. Within 48 hours, the experienced troops are gone, heading west for rest and refitting. The 106th is left alone on the ridge. Over 15,000 men, most of whom have never fired a shot in combat. Major General Alan Jones, the division commander, is a career officer, competent but cautious. He has voiced concerns about his division's exposed position, the lack of reserves, the vulnerability of his flanks. His concerns are noted and largely ignored. The prevailing wisdom is clear. Nothing is going to happen here. The Schnee Eifel is a quiet sector, a place for green troops to acclimate. On December 14th, 2 days before the German offensive begins, patrols from the 422nd Regiment report unusual activity, fresh vehicle tracks in the snow, sounds of engines in the German-held forest, flares being fired at night. These reports reach division headquarters. An intelligence officer notes them in his log. No action is taken. The tracks are assumed to be from routine supply convoys. The engine sounds are attributed to defensive repositioning. The flares are unexplained but not considered threatening. On December 15th, a German artillery deserter crosses the lines and surrenders to American forces. He claims a major offensive is imminent, perhaps within 24 hours. Thousands of troops, hundreds of tanks, an attack along the entire Ardennes front. The deserter is interrogated. His story is detailed, consistent, alarming, but without corroborating evidence, it is filed as possible disinformation. A report is sent to higher headquarters, but does not reach the 106th Division until after the attack has begun. On the evening of December 15th, some officers in the 422nd and 423rd Regiments feel uneasy. The forest is too quiet. The German positions across the valley are dark, silent, not the normal routine of war, but the ominous silence of held breath. One company commander writes in his diary, "Something is wrong. Can't explain it. Just a feeling. The kind of quiet that comes before a storm." He is right, but by the time anyone realizes it, it will be too late. To understand what happened to the 422nd and 423rd Regiments, you must understand who they were. Not combat veterans, not hardened soldiers, but ordinary American men, boys, really, who had trained for war but never experienced it. The 106th Infantry Division's shoulder patch featured a golden lion's head, fierce, proud, protective. Their motto reflected their identity: strength through unity, courage through preparation. But in December 1944, the Golden Lions were sent into battle unprepared for the reality they would face. Among them was Private First Class Michael Torrance, 19 years old, from Youngstown, Ohio. Son of a steelworker. He had enlisted in 1943, trained with the 106th for over a year, developed friendships, learned to trust the men around him. Then, weeks before deployment, he was transferred. Not to a different unit, but to a different company within the 423rd Regiment. The Army's personnel system, trying to balance unit strengths, shuffled soldiers like cards. When he arrived in Belgium, he knew almost no one in his squad. The months of training together, the bonds formed, irrelevant. He was starting over in a unit heading into combat. In his last letter home, dated December 10th, 1944, he wrote, "We're finally in Europe. They say this sector is quiet. I hope they're right. I'm in a new company now. Don't know these guys yet. Miss the friends from training, but I guess it doesn't matter. We're all 106th, all Golden Lions." Sergeant Jack Delaney was one of the few experienced soldiers in the 422nd Regiment, 28 years old, Boston Irish. He'd survived Normandy with the 1st Infantry Division, fought through France, earned a Bronze Star. He was wounded in October, shrapnel in his left shoulder, and after recovering was reassigned to the 106th as an experienced NCO to help train Green troops. He didn't want to leave his original unit. He'd fought beside those men for 2 years, but the army needed experienced sergeants in replacement divisions. Delaney was transferred over his objections. In a letter to his brother, dated December 13th, he wrote, "These kids are good kids. They've been well trained, better than we were before Normandy. But they don't know, can't know until they've been under fire. I try to prepare them, but there's no way to explain it. The sound, the confusion, the way everything you learned in training goes out the window when someone is shooting at you. I hope they never have to learn. But I think they will. Soon." Captain William Chen commanded B Company of the 422nd Regiment. He was unusual, one of the few Chinese-American officers in the European theater. His family, initially mistaken for Japanese after Pearl Harbor, had faced discrimination until officials realized their error. Chen volunteered immediately, driven by a need to prove loyalty that should never have been questioned. He was a good officer, methodical, careful, by the book. But he was given an impossible task. Take a company of men who had never seen combat and position them in a defensive line, facing an enemy they had been told was defeated. In his official report, filed December 13th, Chen wrote, "Company positions established. Defensive works adequate given time constraints. Morale good. Men confident but untested. Recommend additional reconnaissance of German positions across valley. Recent patrol reports suggest more activity than intelligence assessments indicate." The recommendation was noted. No additional reconnaissance was authorized. The 422nd and 423rd Regiments comprised over 5,000 men each: engineers, medics, cooks, radio operators, clerks, the vast machinery of a modern military unit. Most were in their late teens or early 20s. Most had never been outside the United States before November 1944. Most had joined the army expecting to serve, but hoping the war would end before they saw combat. They came from every state, every background. Farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Detroit, college students whose education was interrupted, immigrants' sons proving their American identity. They had trained together for months, practiced assaults on mock German positions, learned to dig foxholes, string communication wire, call for artillery support. They had become proficient at the mechanics of war. But they had never experienced the reality, the visceral shock of incoming artillery, the terror of being under fire with no cover, the confusion when plans collapse and training proves inadequate. The 2nd Infantry Division veterans who briefly overlapped with them tried to offer advice. One sergeant told a group of 106th soldiers, "When the shells start coming, you'll understand why we're so tired. It's not the physical exhaustion. It's knowing that any second, randomly, you could just cease to exist. You can't train for that. You can only survive it." The 106th soldiers nodded politely. They thought they understood. They didn't. The technology of isolation. The 422nd and 423rd Regiments were equipped with standard American infantry weapons and equipment. M1 Garand rifles, Browning automatic rifles, 30 caliber machine guns, 60 mm and 81 mm mortars, artillery support from attached field artillery battalions. On paper, they were well equipped. In reality, they were dangerously vulnerable. The primary problem was communication. Each regiment had radios for contact with division headquarters. SCR 619 sets installed at regimental command posts. Companies had smaller SCR-300 walkie-talkie radios for tactical communication. But the Schnee-Eifel's terrain degraded radio signals, mountains blocked transmissions, forests absorbed radio waves, weather created atmospheric interference. Communication between the ridge and division headquarters, located miles to the west, was spotty even in ideal conditions. Field telephone lines provided backup. Miles of wire strung through the forest, connecting companies to battalion headquarters, battalions to regiment, regiments to division. The system worked when the wires weren't cut. German artillery, infiltrators, falling trees, heavy snow, any of these could sever the lines. When that happened, communication depended on runners, men who would sprint through the forest carrying messages, hoping they weren't killed, captured, or lost along the way. The 106th communication system was not inadequate by 1944 standards, but it was fragile. And when the German offensive began, fragility became fatal. On December 15, 1944, one day before the offensive, a German deserter crossed the lines in a sector south of the Schnee-Eifel. He was brought to American intelligence for interrogation. His story was alarming. He claimed to be from the 12th SS Panzer Division. He said his division, along with multiple others, was massing in assembly areas just across the border. The attack would begin tomorrow, December 16th, dawn, along the entire Ardennes front. The interrogation officer was skeptical but thorough. The deserter's story remained consistent through hours of questioning. His knowledge of German units and positions seemed genuine. He provided specific details, artillery positions, tank assembly areas, even the code words for the offensive. The report was classified urgent and sent up the chain of command. It reached 1st Army headquarters. Intelligence analysts examined it. Some argued it should be taken seriously. Others dismissed it as a plant. Deliberate disinformation designed to create panic. General Courtney Hodges, 1st Army commander, was briefed on the report. He ordered heightened alert status, but did not authorize major repositioning of forces. Moving thousands of troops based on one deserter's claims seemed excessive. The report reached the 12th Army Group headquarters. General Bradley's staff noted it. No action was taken. The prevailing assessment remained unchanged. Germany was incapable of a major offensive. The report never reached the 106th Infantry Division. It stopped at 1st Army level, where staff officers decided it was not sufficiently credible to warrant alarming frontline units. Major General Jones and his regimental commanders went to sleep on the night of December 15th, unaware that their positions would be attacked in less than 12 hours. The 422nd and 423rd Regiments had been warned. The warning never reached them. Years later, historians would identify this as the critical failure, not the last warning ignored, but the most specific, the most urgent, the one that might have saved thousands of lives if someone had taken it seriously. But in December 1944, amid the flood of intelligence reports, interrogations, and rumors, one deserter's warning was lost in the noise. The Golden Lions slept peacefully on December 15th. They would wake to hell. December 16th, 1944, 5:30 a.m. The forest explodes. German artillery, over 1,800 guns arrayed along an 85-mile front, opens fire simultaneously. Shells scream through the darkness, slamming into American positions with relentless mechanical fury. The ground shakes. Trees splinter, foxholes collapse, men wake from sleep into nightmare. The barrage lasts 90 minutes. Some positions receive hundreds of shells. Company command posts are obliterated. Communication lines are severed. Men die in their sleeping bags, never seeing what killed them. On the Schnee Eifel, the 422nd and 423rd Regiments take the full force of German fury. Their positions, strung along miles of forested ridge, are hammered systematically. German forward observers, infiltrated days earlier, call fire on specific targets, command posts, artillery positions, communication hubs. When the artillery stops at 7 a.m., the silence is worse than the noise. Then the searchlights ignite. A German innovation, powerful searchlights aimed at low clouds, creating artificial moonlight that turns the snow-covered battlefield into a ghostly, surreal landscape. American soldiers, trained for night combat in darkness, are suddenly exposed, visible, vulnerable. Then the infantry comes, and the tanks. The first failure, the encirclement, begins. The German plan is elegant and brutal. 2 panzer divisions, the 18th and 62nd Volksgrenadier divisions, will attack on either side of the Schnee Eifel, bypassing the ridge itself. They will punch through weak points in the American line north and south of the 422nd and 423rd positions, then link up behind the ridge, cutting off both regiments. The Americans on the Schnee Eifel will be trapped, surrounded, cut off from supplies, reinforcements, and escape routes. By 9 a.m. on December 16th, German forces have broken through at WW2’s, the villages north and south of the Schnee Eifel. American units in those locations, outnumbered and overwhelmed, fall back or are destroyed. The 422nd and 423rd Regiments, dug in on the ridge itself, fight effectively against frontal attacks. Their defensive positions are strong, they have fields of fire, they repel German infantry assaults, but they don't realize they're being bypassed. The main German thrust is not aimed at them, but around them. By noon on December 16th, German panzer units are miles behind the Schnee Eifel, moving west. The 2 regiments on the ridge are operationally surrounded. They don't know it yet. The second failure, communications collapse. At 6 a.m., as the artillery barrage intensifies, the field telephone line connecting the 422nd Regiment to division headquarters is cut. Engineers attempt to repair it. They find multiple breaks, dozens of wires severed by shell fire. The regimental commander, Colonel George Deschanel, tries the radio. Static. The SCR-619 set is functional, but cannot penetrate the atmospheric interference and terrain obstacles. He hears fragments of transmissions, but cannot establish two-way communication. The 423rd Regiment faces the same problem. Their phone lines are cut. Their radio works intermittently. Brief moments of contact followed by long periods of silence. By 10 a.m., both regiments are functionally isolated. They can communicate internally between companies and battalions, but cannot reach division headquarters. They have no idea what is happening beyond their immediate vicinity. They know they are under attack. They do not know the attack's scale. They do not know German forces are moving behind them. They do not know they are being encircled. Division headquarters, located in St. Vith, 12 miles to the west, is itself under pressure. German forces are attacking the town from multiple directions. General Jones is trying to manage the defense of St. Vith, while simultaneously coordinating the response to attacks all along his divisional front. He knows communication with the Schnee Eifel is lost. He tries to send radio messages. He tries to dispatch messengers, but the roads are under German fire. Messengers are killed or captured. Radio messages go unacknowledged. By evening of December 16th, Jones makes a critical decision. He orders the 422nd and 423rd to withdraw from the Schnee-Eifel and fight their way back to St. Vith. The order is transmitted by radio at 7:30 p.m. It never reaches either regiment. The radios are still not functioning reliably. The order is sent multiple times. Each time, there is no acknowledgement, no confirmation of receipt. The regiments on the Schnee-Eifel never receive the order to withdraw. The third failure. The trap closes. December 17th. Morning. The 422nd and 423rd Regiments wake to discover their situation has deteriorated overnight. Patrols sent west towards St. Vith report German forces blocking the roads. Patrols sent south report the same. They are surrounded. Colonel Deschenaux, commanding the 422nd, calls a meeting of his battalion commanders. They study maps, assess their situation. They have ammunition for perhaps 2 more days of heavy fighting, food for 3 days. Medical supplies are limited. They can try to break out, fight their way west through the German encirclement. But they have no clear intelligence about enemy strength or positions. Breaking out could mean walking into a massacre, or they can hold their positions, wait for relief. Surely division headquarters knows they're cut off. Surely a relief force is being organized. Deschenaux decides to wait. It is a reasonable decision based on incomplete information. He does not know that St. Vith itself is under siege, that no relief force is coming. That division headquarters has written off the 2 regiments as lost. The 423rd Regiment, commanded by Colonel Charles Cavender, reaches the same conclusion. Hold, wait for relief, conserve ammunition. They dig in deeper, string more wire, prepare for siege. December 17th passes. No relief comes. Radio contact with division remains impossible. Patrols trying to break through to St. Vith are driven back or fail to return. By evening of December 17th, both regimental commanders realize the truth. They are on their own. No one is coming. They will have to save themselves. The warnings ignored. A retrospective. After the war, investigators would identify 6 separate warnings that could have prevented or mitigated the disaster. The first, patrol reports from December 10th to 14th describing increased German activity, dismissed as routine. The second, the German deserter on December 15th, claiming an imminent offensive, classified but not acted upon. The third, a signals intelligence report on December 14th, noting complete German radio silence across the Ardennes sector, filed without analysis. The fourth, Belgian resistance reports on December 15th describing large German troop movements, received too late to be processed. The fifth, a 9th Air Force reconnaissance pilot's report on December 14th of unusual concentrations of vehicles in German-held forests, never forwarded to ground commanders. The sixth, requests from the 106th Division officers for permission to conduct aggressive reconnaissance across the German border. Denied as unnecessarily provocative. 6 warnings, 6 failures to act. The 422nd and 423rd Regiments walked into catastrophe because the system designed to protect them could not see or refuse to see what was directly ahead. Colonel George Deschenaux stands in his command post on the morning of December 18th. The post is a reinforced dugout carved into the hillside, covered with logs and earth. It has survived 2 days of artillery bombardment. But it cannot survive the reality closing in. German forces are everywhere. Artillery pounds his positions continuously. Infantry probes test his defenses. Tanks have been spotted on roads that should be in American hands. His ammunition is nearly gone. Medical supplies are exhausted. Wounded men lie in makeshift aid stations with no morphine, no bandages, minimal care. Food is running low. Water is scarce, and no relief is coming. Deschenaux calls his battalion commanders. They gather in the dim command post, faces grey with exhaustion and realization. "We have two choices," Deschenaux says. "We can attempt a breakout, try to fight our way to St. Vith, or we can surrender." The words hang in the air. Surrender. The unthinkable option. One battalion commander argues for the breakout. They're soldiers. They should die fighting, not in captivity. Another argues against. A breakout will cost hundreds of lives, maybe all of them. The wounded will be left behind. And for what? They might not even make it through German lines. Deschenaux makes his decision. He will attempt one final breakout. If it fails, if the casualties are too high, he will surrender to save the men who remain. At 2 p.m. on December 18th, elements of the 422nd Regiment attempt to break through German encirclement. They move west toward St. Vith, hoping to find a weak point in German lines. They are met with withering fire, tanks, machine guns, artillery. Within an hour, the breakout has failed. Dozens of men are killed. More are wounded. The regiment pulls back to defensive positions. Deschenaux realizes the truth. They cannot break out. They cannot hold indefinitely. They cannot be relieved. At 4 p.m. on December 19th, after 3 days of combat, Colonel Deschenaux surrenders the 422nd Regiment. Approximately 2,500 men lay down their arms. It is the largest surrender of American forces in the European theater. Private Michael Torrance crouches in a foxhole on December 18th. He has been in this hole for 3 days. He has not slept more than a few hours. He has eaten 1 K ration and some melted snow. His feet are numb. His hands shake. Around him, the forest is a nightmare landscape. Trees shattered by artillery, snow churned to bloody mud, bodies, American and German, frozen in the positions where they fell. He hears someone calling his name. It's his squad leader, Sergeant Morrison. "We're pulling back," Morrison says. Colonel's orders, regroup at the command post. Torrance climbs out of his foxhole, surprised his legs still work. He follows Morrison through the trees. Other soldiers emerge from positions, ghosts stumbling through smoke and snow. They reach the command post. Hundreds of men are gathered, more arriving every minute. Officers stand in small groups, talking in low voices. Then Colonel Deschenaux appears. He stands on an ammunition box so everyone can see him. "Men of the 422nd, he begins. His voice is hoarse. "We have fought well. We have done our duty, but we are out of ammunition, out of supplies, and out of options. I have decided to surrender the regiment to prevent further loss of life." Silence. Stunned, disbelieving silence. Then someone shouts, "No!" "We can't surrender." Others join in. Angry voices, defiant, refusing to accept the reality. Deschenaux raises his hand. "This is not a debate. This is an order. We will surrender with honor. We will survive this war and go home. That is what matters." Torrance feels numb. Surrender. He never imagined this, never thought it was possible. American soldiers don't surrender. They fight, they win, but they have not won. They have been surrounded, cut off, and abandoned, and now they will spend the rest of the war in German captivity, if they survive that long. Henri Dubois is a Belgian resistance liaison operating near Schönberg, a village west of the Schnee-Eifel. On December 19th, he watches from a concealed position as long columns of American soldiers march past, hands raised, guarded by German troops. There are hundreds of them, maybe thousands, exhausted, hollow-eyed, stumbling through the snow. Some are wounded, supported by their comrades. Others stare straight ahead, faces blank with shock. Dubois has seen retreating soldiers before. He has seen defeat. But this is different. This is surrender on a scale he cannot comprehend. He makes notes trying to count. At least 2,000 men, possibly more. All from the same division. He can see the golden lion patch on their shoulders. Where are they going? To POW camps in Germany, presumably. How many will survive the march? The winter? The war? He wants to help. But what can he do? The Germans are everywhere. Any attempt at rescue would be suicide. He watches until the last American disappears around a bend in the road. Then he returns to his hideout and writes a report for Allied intelligence. December 19th, 1944. Witnessed surrender and capture of large American force near Schönberg. Estimate 2,000 to 3,000 men. Identified as the 106th Infantry Division. Men appeared exhausted, many wounded. German captors numerous and well organized. Capture appears to be result of encirclement operation. American positions on Schnee-Eifel have been overrun or bypassed. The report will reach Allied headquarters 3 days later. By then, the battle has moved on. St. Vith has fallen. The German offensive is driving deep into Belgium. The surrender of the 422nd and 423rd Regiments is just one more disaster in a week of catastrophes. Captain William Chen leads B Company of the 422nd Regiment on December 18th, or what remains of it. He started with 187 men. Now he has perhaps 60. The rest are dead, wounded, or separated. At midday, he receives orders to withdraw to the regimental command post. He gathers his men, conducts a head count, and begins moving through the forest. They encounter German forces almost immediately. A brief, savage firefight. Chen loses 5 men. The company scatters, regrouping 100 yards away. They continue west, moving cautiously. Every shadow could be a German soldier. Every sound could be an ambush. At 3 p.m., they reach the command post. Chen sees the mass of soldiers gathering. He understands immediately what is happening. Surrender. He finds Colonel Deschenaux, pulls him aside. "Sir, some of us want to try breaking through on our own. Small groups. Better chance than surrendering." Deschenaux shakes his head. "I've given the order, Captain. The regiment surrenders together." "Sir, with respect." "That's an order, Chen." Chen salutes, returns to his men, explains the situation. Some of them argue. Some want to try escaping. Others are too exhausted to care. Chen makes a decision. He will obey the surrender order, but he will document everything. If he survives captivity, he will make sure the truth is told. He writes in his small notebook, December 18th, 1944, approximately 1600 hours. 422nd Regiment surrendering after 3 days of combat. Ammunition exhausted. No relief received. Communication with division lost December 16th. Surrounded by superior German forces. Casualties heavy. Decision to surrender made to prevent further loss of life. He tears out the page, folds it, hides it in his boot. If the Germans search him, they might find it, but it's a chance he'll take. He will carry that page through 18 months of captivity. He will bring it home. And decades later, it will be one of the few contemporary documents describing what really happened on the Schnee-Eifel.
This red arrow marks the critical advance point. We must hold the line here.
But the 3rd Division is already spread too thin, Colonel.
On December 20th, 1944, 4 days after the German offensive began, Allied Supreme Headquarters convenes an emergency meeting. The topic: the disaster unfolding in the Ardennes. The situation is catastrophic. Multiple American divisions shattered, entire regiments missing. St. Vith fallen after days of desperate defense. German panzer units driving deep into Belgium, threatening the vital supply hub at Bastogne. And the worst news of all, the 106th Infantry Division has been effectively destroyed. The 422nd and 423rd Regiments, over 8,000 men, are confirmed captured or missing. Over 8,000 American soldiers, more than were lost at Pearl Harbor, gone in 72 hours. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, demands answers. How did this happen? Why was the offensive not predicted? What went wrong? His staff offers explanations: intelligence failure, German deception, bad weather preventing aerial reconnaissance, the calculated risk of thinly holding the Ardennes sector. Eisenhower is not interested in excuses. Continue. He wants accountability, but he also wants damage control. How does this look to the American public? He asks. How do we explain that an entire division was destroyed in 3 days? The public affairs officers in the room understand the problem immediately. The United States has been winning the war for 6 months. Paris liberated, France secured, the Rhine within reach. The narrative has been one of inevitable victory. Suddenly revealing that Germany is capable of destroying American divisions will shatter that narrative. It will raise questions about competence, about leadership, about whether the war is actually being won. One officer suggests, we emphasize the heroic defense. The 106th held long enough for other forces to stabilize the line. Their sacrifice prevented a greater disaster. Another adds, we don't mention the surrender immediately. We list them as missing in action until we have complete casualty accounting. A third proposes, we bury the 106th story in the larger Battle of the Bulge narrative. Make it about Bastogne, about Patton's relief, about ultimate American victory. The 106th becomes a footnote. Eisenhower nods slowly. We tell the truth, but we control the timing and framing. The public gets the facts, but in context that doesn't create panic or undermine confidence. This decision triggers the first layer of what will become a decades-long obscuring of the 106th Division's fate. Not a deliberate conspiracy, but a bureaucratic mechanism designed to manage information flow and maintain public morale during a crisis. In December 1944, all soldier mail from the European theatre passes through military censors. Letters are read, sensitive information is redacted, some letters are delayed or blocked entirely. After December 16th, censorship intensifies dramatically. The War Department does not want the American public to know the full extent of the German offensive. News reports are carefully controlled. Casualty figures are delayed. Details about specific units, especially the 106th Division, are suppressed. On December 23rd, the censorship office receives specific instructions. Any mail mentioning the 106th Division's disaster is to be held indefinitely. Any soldier attempting to write about the surrender of the 422nd and 423rd Regiments will have their letters confiscated and face disciplinary action. The justification is operational security. If the Germans learn the full extent of American losses, it might encourage them to press their offensive harder. But the practical effect is to hide the truth from families, parents, wives, siblings who write to soldiers in the 106th receive no response. When they contact the War Department asking for information, they are told only that their soldier is missing in action and that more information will be provided when available. The promised information never comes, not for weeks, sometimes months. By January 1945, as the Battle of the Bulge winds down and Allied forces regain the initiative, the War Department begins accounting for casualties. The numbers are staggering. Over 80,000 American casualties, including nearly 20,000 killed. The 106th Infantry Division is among the hardest hit. By late January, casualty accountants determine approximately 8,663 men from the division are casualties. Of these, roughly 6,800 from the 422nd and 423rd Regiments are missing. Over 7,000 eventually confirmed as prisoners of war. 416 confirmed killed in action in the first 3 days. Hundreds more died in captivity or remain unaccounted for. These numbers are catastrophic. They represent the largest American surrender since Bataan in 1942. But the War Department does not release these figures immediately. Instead, they are absorbed into the larger Battle of the Bulge statistics. The 106th's losses are grouped with casualties from other divisions. Unit-specific information is classified. When families inquire about soldiers from the 422nd and 423rd, they are told the soldier was part of combat operations in the Ardennes during December 1944. The specific circumstances surrounded, abandoned, forced to surrender are omitted. The names 422nd Infantry Regiment and 423rd Infantry Regiment gradually disappear from official correspondence. The soldiers are simply listed as 106th Infantry Division casualties without specifying which regiment or how they were lost. This is not unique to the 106th. Multiple units that suffered catastrophic losses during the Bulge are quietly reorganized or disbanded, their records dispersed. It is easier, bureaucratically, to distribute casualties across many units than to acknowledge that specific units were destroyed. The cover-up, if it can be called that, is not a conspiracy in the traditional sense. There are no secret meetings where officers plot to hide the truth. There are no destroyed documents or assassinated whistleblowers. Instead, it is a systemic process. A bureaucratic mechanism that prioritizes institutional continuity over individual accountability. The Army does not want to admit that it sent an unprepared division into a vulnerable position based on catastrophically wrong intelligence and then abandoned 2 regiments to their fate. Such an admission would raise uncomfortable questions about command decisions, about the replacement system, about whether the generals who made those decisions should be held accountable. So the story is massaged, smoothed, rewritten. The 106th Division becomes a unit that fought valiantly in the Ardennes and suffered heavy casualties in the opening days of the German offensive. Accurate, but incomplete. The specific circumstances, the encirclement, the failed communications, the 3 days of isolation, the mass surrender, are buried in classified after-action reports that will remain sealed for decades. In February 1945, the 106th Division is officially reconstituted using replacement troops and survivors from other elements of the division. The new 106th has nothing to do with the old one except the name and shoulder patch. The Golden Lions that fought on the Schnee Eifel cease to exist as an organizational entity. They are replaced by a new unit with the same designation but none of the history. By March 1945, The 422nd and 423rd Regiments are listed in official documents as inactivated due to battle losses. No elaboration, no explanation, just gone. In April 1945, the Army's Inspector General completes a confidential investigation into the 106th Division disaster. The report is damning. It identifies multiple failures, intelligence officers who dismissed warnings of German buildup, division commanders who placed inexperienced regiments in vulnerable positions, communication systems inadequate for the terrain and operational conditions, failure to authorize withdrawal when encirclement became apparent, lack of contingency planning for worst-case scenarios. The report concludes, the loss of the 422nd and 423rd Infantry Regiments was not inevitable. It resulted from a cascading series of failures at multiple command levels, combined with unexpected enemy capability and unfavorable terrain and weather conditions. The report recommends improved intelligence analysis, enhanced communication systems, better training for green divisions, and accountability measures for officers who ignored warnings. It also recommends official acknowledgement of the circumstances surrounding the regiment's surrender to provide closure for families and historical accuracy for future military education. The report is classified secret and filed. No press release is issued. No public announcement is made. The recommendations are noted, but implementation is slow and incomplete. The accountability measures are never implemented. By the time the report is completed, the war in Europe is ending. Officers who made decisions regarding the 106th are focused on final operations. Some are reassigned, some retire. None face formal inquiry into their roles in the disaster. The families of the 422nd and 423rd are never informed that an investigation was conducted. They are never told what the investigation found. They are never given the closure the report recommended. The report remains classified until 1973, 28 years after the battle. By then, most of the soldiers who fought on the Schnee-Eifel are in their 50s. Their families have spent 3 decades with partial truths and bureaucratic evasions. The truth, when it finally emerges, comes too late to matter to the people who needed it most. In March 1945, as the war in Europe enters its final phase, the US Army convenes a board of inquiry to investigate exceptional casualty rates during the Battle of the Bulge. The 106th Infantry Division is the primary focus. The board is composed of 3 officers, a colonel from the Inspector General's office, a lieutenant colonel from Army Intelligence, and a major from the Judge Advocate General's Corps. They are tasked with determining whether the catastrophic losses resulted from enemy action, command failures, or systemic problems. The investigation lasts 8 weeks. The board interviews surviving officers, reviews after-action reports, examines communication logs, and analyzes tactical decisions. Their preliminary findings are damning. The 106th Division was inadequately prepared for combat operations against a determined enemy. Communication systems were insufficient for operational requirements in difficult terrain. Intelligence warnings were not properly disseminated to frontline units. Division command failed to authorize timely withdrawal when encirclement became apparent. In other words, the division was unprepared, under-equipped, and poorly led. The disaster was not just bad luck, it was preventable. The board recommends multiple reforms and suggests that certain command decisions warrant further investigation for possible negligence. But then something strange happens. On April 20th, 1945, the board receives a document that contradicts the emerging narrative. It is a sworn statement from Captain William Chen, B Company commander of the 422nd Regiment, recently liberated from a German POW camp. Chen's statement is detailed, precise, and troubling. He describes the regiment's deployment, the lack of adequate equipment and training time, the communication failures on December 16th. This aligns with the board's findings, but then Chen makes a claim that challenges the official record. He states that on the morning of December 16th, approximately 7:15 a.m., less than 2 hours after the German artillery barrage began, he received a radio transmission. Not from regimental headquarters, not from division, but from an unidentified American station. The transmission was brief, distorted by static and atmospheric interference, barely audible through the chaos of artillery fire. But Chen is certain of what he heard. All units Losheim sector. Immediate withdrawal authorization. Fall back to Blue Line. Acknowledge. Repeat. All units withdraw to Blue Line. Acknowledge. Blue Line was the code name for the secondary defensive positions west of the Schnee Eifel. Chen attempted to respond, to request clarification of the order, but his radio failed completely moments later. He made the decision to withdraw his company based on this transmission, believing he was following orders from higher command. His decision saved 37 lives. B Company was one of the few units that escaped the encirclement because Chen began withdrawing hours before other companies, before German forces completely sealed the trap. But according to official records, no such transmission was ever made. Division headquarters did not issue a withdrawal order until 7:30 p.m. on December 16th, 12 hours after Chen claims to have received it. And that order never reached the regiments on the Schnee Eifel. There is no record of any immediate withdrawal authorization being broadcast to units in the Losheim sector at 7:15 a.m. on December 16th. Chen insists the transmission was real. He heard it. He acted on it. His men survived because of it. The board investigates. They examine radio logs from division headquarters, from adjacent units, even from German signals intelligence captured after the war.